The silence in the boardroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 23 people sat around the massive mahogany table, their faces growing paler by the second as they stared at the man at the head of the room. Jonathan Liu, billionaire CEO of Liu Industries, had been speaking for 10 minutes straight in rapid Mandarin Chinese, his voice growing more frustrated with each passing moment. Not a single person in that room understood a word he was saying. The merger deal worth $800 million was falling apart right before their eyes. The American executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, loosening their ties and dabbing sweat from their foreheads despite the air conditioning running at full blast. The Chinese delegation looked equally uncomfortable, whispering among themselves and checking their phones repeatedly. Everyone knew this meeting could make or break both companies, but nobody could communicate. "Where is the translator?" whispered Rebecca Thompson, the lead negotiator for Morrison Corporation, her voice barely audible. She had flown in from New York specifically for this meeting, and now everything was crumbling. Her assistant shrugged helplessly, frantically typing on his phone to contact the translation service. Jonathan Liu slammed his hand on the table, causing everyone to jump. He spoke again in Mandarin, his tone sharp and clearly angry. The Chinese executives nodded gravely while the Americans looked around desperately, hoping anyone, might suddenly develop the ability to understand Chinese. "This is a disaster," muttered Tom Bradley, Morrison's CFO, under his breath. "We've been planning this merger for 2 years. If we can't communicate today, Liu Industries will walk away forever." Outside the glass-walled boardroom, Keisha Williams pushed her cleaning cart quietly down the hallway. She wore the standard janitor uniform, navy blue shirt and matching pants, with her name tag pinned neatly to her chest. At 26, she had learned to move through these corporate spaces like a ghost. Rich executives rarely noticed the cleaning staff, which suited her just fine. It meant she could work in peace while listening to audiobooks through her earbuds. But today something was different. As she approached the boardroom to empty the trash bins, she could hear raised voices through the thick glass. She paused, pulling out one earbud. The sound that reached her ears made her freeze completely. Someone was speaking in perfect Mandarin Chinese, and they sounded very upset. Keisha's heart began to race. She understood every single word Jonathan Liu was saying. He was talking about respect, about wasted time, about how the missing translator showed a lack of professionalism that made him question whether Morrison Corporation was worthy of partnership. He was threatening to end negotiations permanently and leave within the next 5 minutes. She looked through the glass at the chaos inside. 24 people in expensive suits sat helplessly while an $800 million deal died in front of them. Her hands tightened on the handle of her cleaning cart. For the past 3 years, Keisha had worked as a janitor in this building, cleaning offices and boardrooms while the executives made decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. She had a degree in international business from Howard University and spoke 4 languages fluently, but life had taken unexpected turns. Medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment had drained her savings. Student loans piled up. The fancy corporate jobs she had applied for never materialized. So she took this job to pay the bills, telling herself it was temporary. But temporary had stretched into 3 years, and her dreams felt further away than ever. Now, watching the panic in that boardroom, she faced a choice that could change everything. She could walk away, finish cleaning the other offices, and let these powerful people figure out their own problems. Or she could step forward and reveal a secret she had been hiding for years. Jonathan Liu stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He spoke again in Mandarin, his words cutting through the air like a blade. Keisha translated automatically in her mind, "I am leaving now. This level of disrespect and incompetence tells me everything I need to know about your company. The deal is finished." The Chinese delegation began gathering their papers. The Americans looked like they might be sick. Millions of dollars in potential profits were walking out the door, along with hundreds of jobs that would be created by the merger. Keisha's mother had always told her that when you have the power to help, staying silent makes you part of the problem. "Baby," she used to say, "your talents aren't just for you. They're gifts meant to be shared." Taking a deep breath, Keisha knocked on the boardroom door. Every head in the room turned toward her. She could see the confusion in their eyes. What could the janitor possibly want during such an important meeting? Some of the executives looked annoyed at the interruption. Others seemed too stressed to care. But Jonathan Liu paused, his briefcase halfway closed, and studied her face with curious eyes. Keisha opened the door and stepped inside, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The room fell completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 20 floors below. She looked directly at Jonathan Liu and spoke in clear, fluent Mandarin. "Mr. Liu, please don't leave. I understand there has been a misunderstanding about the translator, but this deal is too important for both companies to let communication problems destroy it." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps echoed around the room. Several people dropped their pens. Rebecca Thompson's mouth fell open so wide she looked like she was catching flies. Tom Bradley blinked rapidly as if he thought he might be hallucinating. But it was Jonathan Liu's reaction that mattered most. His eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with interest. He responded in Mandarin, his tone completely different now, curious rather than angry. "You speak my language very well," he said in Chinese. "But you are." "I am the person who has been cleaning your offices for 3 years, Keisha replied in Mandarin, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I am also someone who believes this merger could benefit thousands of people if you give it a chance." The silence stretched out like a taut wire. Every person in that room stared at the young black woman in a janitor's uniform who had just spoken fluent Chinese to one of the most powerful businessmen in Asia. The moment felt suspended in time, balanced on the edge of possibility and disaster. Jonathan Liu set down his briefcase and looked at Keisha with new eyes. When he spoke again, his voice carried a respect that hadn't been there before. "What is your name?" he asked in Mandarin. "Keisha Williams," she replied, switching to English so everyone could understand. "And I would be honored to help translate for this meeting if you'll allow me." The boardroom remained frozen in shocked silence. Outside the windows, the city continued its busy rhythm, unaware that inside this room, a moment was unfolding that would change everything. Jonathan Liu studied Keisha's face for what felt like forever. Then slowly he smiled. The tension in the boardroom could have powered the entire building. Jonathan Liu looked at Keisha Williams, really looked at her, for the first time in 3 years. Here was someone who had been invisible to everyone in this room, walking past their million-dollar decisions while carrying her own intelligence like a hidden treasure. "You would do this?" he asked in English, his accent giving his words a careful precision. "You would help us communicate?" Keisha nodded, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Yes, sir. I believe this merger could create jobs and opportunities for many people. That's more important than my own comfort." Rebecca Thompson finally found her voice. Wait. She looked around the table at her colleagues, then back at Keisha. "You're telling us that our janitor speaks Chinese? Fluently?" "Mandarin, Cantonese, Spanish and French," Keisha said simply. "I have a degree in international business from Howard University." The room erupted in whispers. Tom Bradley leaned over to his assistant. "Did you know about this?" The assistant shook his head frantically. Jonathan Liu raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. He spoke to Keisha in Mandarin. "Why are you working as a janitor if you have these qualifications?" Keisha took a breath before answering in Chinese. "Sometimes life takes unexpected paths. But every job has dignity, and I have learned much by listening and observing while I worked here." Jonathan nodded slowly, respect growing in his eyes. He turned to address the room in English. "Ms. Williams has offered to help us. I believe we should accept her generous offer with gratitude." But she's not a certified translator," sputtered Rebecca. "How do we know she's qualified?" "Test me," Keisha said calmly. She looked at Jonathan. "Ask me to translate anything you want." For the next 10 minutes, Jonathan spoke complex business terms in Mandarin while Keisha translated flawlessly into English. She handled technical vocabulary about market projections, regulatory compliance, and financial structures without missing a beat. When the Chinese delegation spoke among themselves, she translated their concerns about American business practices and their questions about Morrison's manufacturing capabilities. The Americans watched in amazement as their stalled negotiation came back to life. Rebecca Thompson scribbled notes furiously as cultural misunderstandings were cleared up and communication flowed smoothly for the first time all day. "Mr. Liu wants to know about your quality control procedures," Keisha explained to Tom Bradley. "He's particularly concerned about consistency across different factory locations." As Tom answered, Keisha noticed something troubling. 2 board members from Morrison Corporation, Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens, were whispering intensely to each other and shooting dark looks in her direction. Their expressions weren't just surprised, they seemed angry that she had stepped forward. The meeting progressed for 2 hours. Keisha facilitated discussions about production timelines, profit sharing, and employee protection during the transition. Her translations were so accurate and nuanced that both sides began relaxing and engaging more openly. "Tell Mr. Liu that we're committed to maintaining all current Chinese employees," Rebecca said. We see this as a partnership, not a takeover. When Keisha translated this, Jonathan's face brightened. He responded enthusiastically in Mandarin about his appreciation for that commitment. But Henry Walsh interrupted. How do we know she's translating accurately? She could be saying anything. Jonathan looked at Henry with cool eyes. I understand English perfectly, Mr. Walsh. I simply prefer to conduct important business in my native language for precision. Ms. Williams has been completely faithful in her translations. Patricia Stevens shifted uncomfortably. It just seems irregular. We should wait for a professional translator. Ms. Williams is being professional, Jonathan said firmly. More professional than the service that failed to show up today. As the meeting continued, Keisha began to understand the complex dynamics at play. This wasn't just about merging two companies. Morrison Corporation was struggling financially, and this deal with Lu Industries could save hundreds of American jobs. The Chinese company would gain access to American markets and manufacturing expertise. But she also sensed undercurrents of tension. Some of the Morrison executives seemed nervous about details that should have been straightforward. When Jonathan asked about Morrison's debt situation, Henry Walsh's face went pale, and he fumbled his answer. Mr. Liu would like to see your financial records from the past 2 years, Keisha translated. He wants to ensure transparency before moving forward. The room went quiet. Rebecca Thompson glanced at her colleagues before answering. Of course. We'll have our accounting department prepare everything. But Keisha caught a quick exchange of worried looks between Henry and Patricia. Something wasn't right. As the formal meeting concluded, Jonathan stood and addressed the room in English. Thanks to Ms. Williams, we have made excellent progress today. I would like to schedule follow-up meetings next week to finalize the details. Everyone began gathering their papers and shaking hands. The mood was dramatically different from the panic of 3 hours earlier. Rebecca Thompson approached Keisha as the room began to empty. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You saved this deal. You might have saved our entire company. I'm just glad I could help, Keisha replied. But as Rebecca walked away, Keisha heard Henry Walsh mutter to Patricia Stevens, this complicates things. We need to talk. They left the room quickly, their voices fading down the hallway. Keisha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Jonathan Liu was the last to leave. He approached Keisha as she began collecting the empty coffee cups and water glasses, falling back into her janitor role automatically. Ms. Williams, he said quietly, may I speak with you privately? She nodded, setting down the cups. When they were alone, Jonathan continued. What you did today was remarkable. You saved a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars and countless jobs. But I am curious, why didn't you pursue a career using your languages and business education? Keisha hesitated. She had learned to keep her personal struggles private, especially around executives who might see them as weaknesses. My mother got sick, she said simply. Cancer. The medical bills were overwhelming and I needed steady work with health insurance. This job provided that. Jonathan's expression softened. Is she better now? She passed away last year, Keisha said, her voice steady but her eyes reflecting old pain. But by then I had been out of the business world for so long, I wasn't sure how to get back in. I am sorry for your loss, Jonathan said sincerely. Your mother raised a daughter with great courage and integrity. Thank you. Jonathan studied her for a moment. What would you say if I told you I have been looking for someone exactly like you? Keisha's heart skipped. What do you mean? I need someone who understands both cultures, someone who can help me navigate American business practices while helping Americans understand Chinese perspectives. Someone intelligent, trustworthy, and brave enough to speak up when it matters. The offer hung in the air like a butterfly, beautiful but fragile, ready to disappear if she moved too quickly. Are you offering me a job? She asked carefully. I am offering you an opportunity, Jonathan said. If you are interested. Keisha thought about her small apartment, her student loans, her dreams that had been on hold for 3 years. She thought about her mother's voice telling her that her talents were gifts meant to be shared. Yes, she said. I would be very interested. Jonathan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Good. We will discuss details tomorrow. For now, thank you for today. You have given both our companies a future. As he left, Keisha stood alone in the empty boardroom, hardly believing what had happened. In the space of one afternoon, her entire life had shifted. She had gone from invisible to essential, from hiding her talents to sharing them with gratitude. But as she resumed cleaning, she couldn't shake the memory of Henry Walsh's worried face and his whispered words. This complicates things. She had no idea how complicated things were about to become. The next morning, Keisha arrived at work 30 minutes early, her mind buzzing with anticipation and nervousness. She had barely slept, replaying yesterday's events and wondering if Jonathan Liu's offer had been real or just a polite gesture made in the heat of the moment. She was emptying trash bins on the 15th floor when her supervisor, Mike Rodriguez, found her. "Williams," he called out, looking confused. "There's some fancy Chinese guy asking for you at the front desk. Says he has a meeting with you?" Keisha's heart jumped. That would be Mr. Liu from Liu Industries. Mike scratched his head. "The billionaire? What's he want with you?" "I helped with translation yesterday," Keisha said, trying to keep her voice casual. "Translation?" Mike looked at her like she had grown a second head. "You mean like speaking Chinese?" "Something like that." Mike stared at her for a long moment. 3 years I've been your supervisor, and I'm just now finding out you speak Chinese?" "You never asked," Keisha said with a small smile. When she reached the lobby, Jonathan Liu was waiting by the reception desk, looking impeccable in a charcoal gray suit. He smiled when he saw her approaching. "Good morning, Ms. Williams. I hope I'm not interrupting your work schedule?" "Good morning, Mr. Liu." "Not at all. Please call me Jonathan. I was hoping we could have breakfast and discuss the opportunity one mentioned yesterday. If you're available?" Keisha glanced down at her janitor's uniform, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm not really dressed for—" "You are dressed perfectly," Jonathan said firmly. "Your clothes do not define your worth or your capabilities. Yesterday proved that." They walked to a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office building. Over coffee and pastries, Jonathan explained what he had in mind. "Liu Industries is expanding rapidly in the American market," he said. "But I often feel like I'm missing important cultural nuances. What seems straightforward to me might be offensive to American partners and vice versa. I need someone who can bridge that gap." "What exactly would the job involve?" Keisha asked. "You would be my cultural liaison and personal translator. You would attend meetings, help with communications, and advise me on American business customs. The salary would be $80,000 annually, plus health benefits and travel allowances." Keisha nearly choked on her coffee. $80,000 was more than double what she made as a janitor. That's very generous," she managed. "It's appropriate for the value you would bring," Jonathan said. "But I want to understand more about your background. How did you learn to speak Mandarin so well?" Keisha set down her coffee cup, gathering her thoughts. "In college, I minored in Mandarin because I was fascinated by Chinese culture and business practices. I spent a semester studying in Beijing through an exchange program. I lived with a host family and completely immersed myself in the language." "That explains your fluency. What about your other languages?" "French from high school, and Spanish because I grew up in a neighborhood with many Spanish-speaking families. My mother always said learning languages was like collecting keys, each one opened new doors." Jonathan nodded appreciatively. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was." Keisha's voice softened. "She worked 2 jobs to put me through college. She said education was the one thing no one could take away from me." "Tell me about your degree. What did you study specifically?" For the next hour, Keisha found herself talking about subjects she hadn't discussed in years. Her senior thesis on cross-cultural business negotiations. Her internship with an import-export company. Her dreams of working in international trade. "So what happened?" Jonathan asked gently. "Why didn't you pursue that career path?" Keisha took a deep breath. "During my senior year, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. The treatments were expensive even with insurance. I had to move back home to help care for her and work part-time to cover the medical bills." She explained how her mother's condition had deteriorated, requiring round-the-clock care. How job applications went unanswered while she dealt with hospitals and insurance companies. How temporary work became permanent out of necessity. "After she died, I felt lost," Keisha admitted. "I had been out of the business world for so long. My skills felt rusty. My confidence was shaken. The janitor job paid the bills and gave me time to grieve, but I kept telling myself I'd move on eventually." "But you never stopped learning," Jonathan observed. "Yesterday your business vocabulary was perfect. Your understanding of merger negotiations was sophisticated." Keisha smiled for the first time during the conversation. "I listen to business podcasts while I clean. I read trade journals on my lunch breaks. I guess I never really stopped preparing, even when I wasn't sure what I was preparing for." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, studying her with admiration. "You have been preparing for this moment. Your experiences, both the successes and the struggles, have made you uniquely qualified for this position. You really think so? I know so. Your technical skills are excellent, but more importantly, you understand hardship. You understand what it means to work for something. Many people in business have never cleaned an office or struggled to pay medical bills. That perspective will make you invaluable. Keisha felt tears threatening and blinked them away. I accept your offer. With gratitude. Jonathan extended his hand across the table. Welcome to Lu Industries, Ms. Williams. As they shook hands, Keisha felt like she was stepping into a new life. But even as excitement filled her chest, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning about Henry Walsh's suspicious behavior the day before. When would you like me to start? She asked. How about right now? Jonathan smiled. I have a conference call with our Shanghai office in an hour. Your first task can be helping me understand why our American distribution partners seem frustrated with our communication style. They walked back to the Lu Industries offices on the 32nd floor, a world away from the maintenance rooms where Keisha had spent the last 3 years. The receptionist looked startled when Jonathan introduced Keisha as his new cultural liaison. Please set up Ms. Williams with an office next to mine, Jonathan instructed. And arrange for business cards and a company laptop. As they rode the elevator up, Keisha caught sight of her reflection in the polished steel doors. She was still wearing her janitor's uniform, but something fundamental had changed. She stood straighter. Her eyes held a confidence that had been missing for years. One more thing, Jonathan said as they reached his floor. You mentioned yesterday that some of the Morrison Corporation board members seemed uncomfortable with your presence. Have you had any interactions with Henry Walsh or Patricia Stevens before? Keisha shook her head. Not really. I've cleaned their offices but we've never spoken. Why do you ask? Just curious. In business, it's important to understand all the personalities involved. But as they entered Jonathan's impressive corner office, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that his question had been more than casual curiosity. Something about yesterday's meeting had set things in motion, and not everyone was happy about it. Looking out at the city skyline from the 32nd floor, Keisha Williams realized that her new life came with new challenges. She had been invisible for 3 years, but now she was very much visible. And visibility, she was beginning to understand, could be dangerous. Jonathan's office was a study in elegant simplicity. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, while traditional Chinese artwork hung alongside modern business awards. Keisha tried not to gawk as she took in her new surroundings. Please sit, Jonathan said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. Before we begin working together, I want to make sure you understand exactly what this position entails. He pulled out a formal contract and set it in front of her. This document outlines your responsibilities, salary, benefits, and expectations. Please take your time reviewing it. Keisha read through the contract carefully. The terms were even better than he had mentioned at breakfast. Full health and dental coverage, a retirement plan, 3 weeks of paid vacation, and professional development opportunities. It felt almost too good to be true. This is very generous, she said. But I have to ask, why me? Surely you could hire someone with more formal business experience. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. Experience can be gained. Character cannot be taught. Yesterday you could have stayed silent and safe. Instead you stepped forward to help people you didn't even know. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. He paused, looking out the window before continuing. Also, I have learned that sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected sources. You have observed this business world from a unique perspective. You have seen how decisions made in boardrooms affect the people who actually do the work. Keisha nodded, understanding what he meant. During her 3 years as a janitor, she had overheard countless conversations, executives complaining about lazy workers while those same workers stayed late to meet impossible deadlines, managers making promises they had no intention of keeping, and board members more concerned with stock prices than employee welfare. I want to build a different kind of company, Jonathan continued. One that succeeds not by exploiting people but by respecting them. Your perspective will help me do that. I appreciate that, Keisha said. And I accept your offer wholeheartedly. She signed the contract, feeling like she was signing her name to a new chapter of her life. Excellent, Jonathan said. Now let's discuss your first assignment. The Morrison Corporation merger is moving forward, but I sense there are complications beneath the surface. Yesterday, you mentioned noticing tension among some of their board members. Keisha described her observations about Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens, their whispered conversations, their worried expressions when financial records were mentioned, and their obvious discomfort with her presence. Interesting, Jonathan mused. In my experience, people become defensive when they have something to hide. We need to be careful as we proceed. A knock on the door interrupted them. Jonathan's assistant, Linda Chen, peeked in. Mr. Liu, Henry Walsh from Morrison Corporation is here to see you. He says it's urgent. Jonathan and Keisha exchanged glances. Send him in, Jonathan said. Henry Walsh entered the office looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit was wrinkled. He stopped short when he saw Keisha. I wasn't expecting. I thought we could speak privately, he said to Jonathan. Ms. Williams is now my cultural liaison and will be involved in all aspects of the Morrison deal, Jonathan replied smoothly. Please have a seat. Henry remained standing, his discomfort obvious. I wanted to discuss some concerns about yesterday's meeting. What concerns? Jonathan asked. Well, the translation situation was highly irregular. We have no way of verifying that the translations were accurate. For a deal of this magnitude, we really should use certified professionals. Keisha started to respond, but Jonathan held up a subtle hand, signaling her to let him handle it. Mr. Walsh, as I mentioned yesterday, I understand English perfectly. Ms. Williams' translations were completely accurate. Are you questioning my ability to recognize when someone is misrepresenting my own words? Henry's face reddened. Of course not. I just think we should follow proper procedures. The proper procedure would have been for your company to ensure the contracted translator showed up, Jonathan said coolly. Ms. Williams saved your deal. I would think gratitude would be more appropriate than suspicion. It's not suspicion, it's just. Henry trailed off, clearly flustered. What is it really, Mr. Walsh? Jonathan's voice took on a steely edge. Because your objections seem less about procedures and more about the specific person who helped us. The implication hung in the air. Henry's face went from red to pale. I resent the implication, he said stiffly. This has nothing to do with Ms. Williams personally. Good, Jonathan said. Then we can move forward without further concerns about our translation services. Henry looked like he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Instead, he nodded curtly and left the office. When the door closed, Keisha let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was uncomfortable, she said. Very, Jonathan agreed. And very revealing. Mr. Walsh's concerns had nothing to do with translation accuracy. What do you think he's really worried about? Jonathan was quiet for a moment, then picked up his phone. Linda, please contact our research team. I want a complete background check on Morrison Corporation's financial status, focusing on the past 2 years. Also, I want detailed profiles on all their board members, especially Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens. He hung up and turned back to Keisha. In business, when people become irrationally defensive, it usually means they're protecting something. We need to find out what. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of activity. Keisha was introduced to the Liu Industries team, fitted for business attire, and given a crash course in the company's current projects. Everyone she met was welcoming and professional, treating her with the respect due to someone in an important position. But as afternoon turned to evening, she couldn't shake her uneasiness about Henry Walsh's visit. Something was definitely wrong at Morrison Corporation, and she had a feeling that her involvement in the merger had inadvertently exposed it. Around 6 o'clock, Jonathan knocked on her new office door. How was your first day? He asked. Overwhelming but good, Keisha replied honestly. Thank you for standing up for me with Mr. Walsh. You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Jonathan said. But I want you to be careful. When people feel threatened, they sometimes do unpredictable things. Threatened by what? I'm just a translator. Jonathan studied her face seriously. You're much more than that and they know it. You're intelligent, observant, and you have integrity. Those qualities make you dangerous to people who prefer to operate in shadows. A chill ran down Keisha's spine. Are you saying I might be in danger? I'm saying we both need to be alert. The Morrison deal is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. People have done terrible things for much less. As they prepared to leave for the day, Jonathan's phone buzzed with a text message. His expression darkened as he read it. What is it? Keisha asked. Our research team found something concerning about Morrison's finances. They want to meet first thing tomorrow morning. Standing in the elevator as they descended to the lobby, Keisha realized that accepting Jonathan's job offer had been more than a career change. She had stepped into the middle of something much larger and more complicated than she had imagined. But as she looked at Jonathan's determined profile, she felt a strange sense of confidence. Whatever they were facing, they would face it together. She just hoped they were ready for what they might discover. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jonathan's office as Keisha arrived to find him already deep in conversation with two members of his research team. The expressions on their faces told her immediately that the news wasn't good. "Ah, Keisha, perfect timing," Jonathan said, looking up as she entered. "Please join us. This concerns you as well." The lead researcher, a sharp-eyed woman named Caroline Wu, spread several documents across the conference table. "What we found about Morrison Corporation is troubling," she began without preamble. Keisha took a seat, her stomach tightening with apprehension. "Morrison has been hiding significant financial losses for the past 18 months, Caroline continued. "They've been using creative accounting to make their books look healthier than they actually are." "How significant are we talking?" Jonathan asked. "They're essentially insolvent. Without this merger, they'll likely file for bankruptcy within 6 months." Keisha felt her heart sink. "So they're desperate." "Extremely desperate," confirmed the second researcher, David Park. "But here's where it gets interesting and dangerous. The financial irregularities seem to be concentrated in divisions overseen by Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens." Jonathan leaned forward. "Are you saying they're embezzling?" "We can't prove that yet, but the patterns are suspicious. Large sums moved between accounts with vague explanations. Consulting fees paid to companies that appear to exist only on paper. Equipment purchases that were never delivered." Caroline pulled out another document. "What's more concerning is what we found about their personal finances. Both Walsh and Stevens have been living well beyond their declared salaries. Expensive homes, luxury cars, private school tuition, all purchased in the last 2 years." Keisha studied the financial records, her business education kicking in. If they've been stealing from Morrison, this merger could expose everything. The due diligence process would reveal the missing money. "Exactly," Jonathan said grimly. "Which means they have strong motivation to either stop the merger or control how it proceeds." "But they can't stop it," Keisha pointed out. "Morrison needs this deal to survive." David nodded. "Which brings us to the concerning part. People in their position might try to eliminate anyone who could expose them." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Keisha felt a chill run through her body. "You think they see me as a threat?" she asked. "Think about it from their perspective," Jonathan said gently. "You appeared out of nowhere and saved a deal they probably hoped would fail quietly. Now you're in a position to observe everything that happens during the merger process. If they're hiding financial crimes, having an intelligent, observant person with access to all the meetings is their worst nightmare." Keisha rubbed her temples, feeling overwhelmed. "I just wanted to help with translation. I never meant to get caught up in corporate fraud." Caroline gathered the documents. "We're going to continue investigating, but we'll be discreet. In the meantime, you both need to be very careful." After the researchers left, Jonathan and Keisha sat in heavy silence. The weight of the situation pressed down on them like a physical force. "I should withdraw from the deal," Keisha said finally. "If my presence is causing problems?" "Absolutely not," Jonathan interrupted firmly. "First, you've done nothing wrong. Second, walking away now would only confirm their suspicions that you know something. And third, Morrison's employees don't deserve to lose their jobs because a few executives are criminals." "But what if they try to hurt me?" Jonathan's expression hardened. "They won't get the chance. I'm hiring a security team to keep you safe. And from now on, we work together on everything related to this merger." Keisha looked at him with surprise. "You do that for me? We barely know each other." "I know enough," Jonathan said simply. "You risked your anonymity to help strangers. You've shown integrity at every turn. That makes you worth protecting." His words stirred something warm in Keisha's chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Trust. After so much loss and disappointment, she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone believe in her completely. "Thank you," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get more complicated before it gets better." As if summoned by his words, Jonathan's phone rang. It was Rebecca Thompson from Morrison Corporation. "Jonathan, we have a problem." Rebecca's voice was tight with stress. "Someone broke into our accounting department last night. Files were scattered everywhere and several computers were damaged." Jonathan put the call on speaker so Keisha could hear. "Was anything stolen?" "That's the strange part, nothing obvious is missing. It looks more like someone was searching for something specific and got frustrated when they couldn't find it." Keisha and Jonathan exchanged meaningful glances. Someone was trying to cover their tracks. "Have you called the police?" Jonathan asked. Yes, but they said it was probably random vandalism. The security cameras in that area mysteriously malfunctioned around midnight. How convenient, Jonathan muttered. There's something else, Rebecca continued. Henry Walsh called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. He's claiming we need to reconsider the merger terms because of new security concerns. After ending the call, Jonathan turned to Keisha. They're making their move. What do? We attend that meeting and see what they're planning. But first, I want you to understand something. Jonathan's voice became serious. What we're dealing with goes beyond business now. These people are desperate, which makes them dangerous. If you want to step back, I'll understand completely. Keisha thought about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs and still found energy to encourage her daughter's dreams. She thought about the Morrison employees who would lose their jobs if the company collapsed. She thought about the person she had been 3 years ago, confident, ambitious, ready to take on the world. I'm not stepping back, she said with quiet determination. You're right. Those employees don't deserve to suffer because of a few corrupt executives. Besides, my mother always said that when you have the power to make things right, staying silent makes you part of the problem. Jonathan smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all day. Your mother sounds like she was an extraordinary woman. She was. And she didn't raise me to run from bullies. They spent the rest of the morning preparing for the afternoon meeting. Jonathan briefed Keisha on board meeting protocols and gave her a crash course in recognizing the subtle signs that someone was lying or hiding information. Watch their body language, he advised. Liars often touch their faces, avoid eye contact, or speak in different patterns than usual. Also, pay attention to who speaks and who stays quiet. Sometimes silence is more revealing than words. As they prepared to leave for Morrison Corporation, Jonathan's security chief called to confirm that discreet protection would be in place. I still can't believe this is necessary, Keisha said as they walked to the elevator. Neither can I, Jonathan replied. But I'd rather be overly cautious than leave you vulnerable. In the elevator, Keisha found herself studying Jonathan's profile. Over the past 2 days, she had seen him transition from frustrated businessman to protective ally. His concern for her safety seemed genuine and personal, not just professional courtesy. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Why is this so important to you? You could walk away from the Morrison deal and find other opportunities. Why risk getting involved in their problems? Jonathan was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. When I was young, my father lost his job because his American employer's company was sold to competitors who eliminated his division. He was a good worker, but that didn't matter to people who saw employees as numbers on a spreadsheet. He paused, old pain flickering in his eyes. I promised myself that if I ever had power in the business world, I would use it to protect workers, not discard them. The Morrison employees are depending on this merger for their livelihoods. I won't let corrupt executives destroy their futures. Keisha felt her respect for Jonathan deepen. Like her, he had personal reasons for fighting this battle. Then we better make sure we win, she said. As their car pulled up to Morrison Corporation, Keisha saw Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens entering the building ahead of them. Even from a distance, their body language screamed tension and urgency. Ready? Jonathan asked. Keisha took a deep breath, drawing strength from her mother's memory and Jonathan's unwavering support. Ready. But as they walked into the building, neither of them could have predicted just how far Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens were willing to go to protect their secrets. The Morrison Corporation boardroom felt different this time. The air was thick with tension, and several board members who had been friendly during the previous meeting now avoided making eye contact with Keisha. She and Jonathan took their seats as Henry Walsh called the emergency meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Henry began, his voice carrying an authority that seemed forced. We're here to discuss serious concerns that have arisen regarding our merger with Lou Industries. Rebecca Thompson looked confused. What concerns? Everything seemed to be progressing smoothly. Patricia Stevens leaned forward, her expression grave. That's what we thought too, Rebecca. But we've discovered some troubling information about the translation services used in our previous meeting. Keisha felt her stomach drop. Jonathan remained perfectly still beside her, but she could sense his alertness. What kind of information? Asked Tom Bradley. Henry pulled out a manila folder. We hired a private investigation firm to verify Ms. Williams' qualifications, given the irregular nature of how she became involved in our negotiations. You investigated me? Keisha couldn't keep the shock out of her voice. It's standard procedure for anyone involved in sensitive business matters, Patricia said smoothly. And what we found raises serious questions about your suitability for this role. Jonathan's voice was dangerously quiet. What exactly are you alleging? Henry opened the folder dramatically. According to our investigation, Ms. Williams was terminated from her previous job at Henderson Import-Export for suspicious activity involving client communications. The room erupted in murmurs. Keisha felt like she had been punched in the stomach. That's a lie, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Is it? Patricia challenged. Because we have documentation showing that you were dismissed for allegedly passing confidential information to competitors. Jonathan stood up abruptly. Where is this so-called documentation? Henry slid a paper across the table. Right there. A termination letter citing breach of confidentiality and potential corporate espionage. Keisha stared at the document in horror. It looked official Henderson Import-Export letterhead, professional formatting, even what appeared to be her former supervisor's signature. But every word was fabricated. This is completely false, she said, her voice growing stronger. I never worked for Henderson Import-Export. I've never even heard of that company. Convenient, Patricia said with mock sympathy. Of course you'd deny it. Rebecca Thompson looked troubled. Henry, where did you get this information? From a very reputable private investigation firm, Henry replied. They specialize in corporate background checks. Jonathan picked up the document and examined it carefully. This letterhead looks authentic, but the signature is suspicious. And the language is oddly formal for a termination letter. Are you calling me a liar? Henry's face was reddening. I'm calling this document fabricated, Jonathan said coldly. And I'm wondering why you're so desperate to discredit Ms. Williams. The tension in the room was palpable. Several board members looked uncomfortable, unsure who to believe. Tom Bradley cleared his throat. Perhaps we should verify this independently. Call Henderson Import-Export directly. Henry and Patricia exchanged a quick glance that Keisha caught. Unfortunately, the company went out of business last year, Patricia said. All their records are in storage. How convenient, Jonathan muttered. But the damage was done. Keisha could see doubt creeping into the faces around the table. Even Rebecca Thompson looked uncertain now. Given these concerns, Henry continued, I motion that we suspend the merger negotiations until we can verify Ms. Williams' background through alternative means. I second the motion, Patricia said quickly. Wait, Rebecca protested. That seems extreme. Even if there are questions about Ms. Williams, we could simply use a different translator. The problem goes deeper than translation, Henry said gravely. If Ms. Williams has a history of corporate espionage, how do we know what information she might have already passed to Lou Industries? Our confidential merger discussions could have been compromised. Keisha felt tears of frustration burning her eyes. Everything she had worked for, the opportunity that had seemed like a miracle, was being destroyed by lies. Jonathan placed a protective hand on her shoulder. These allegations are clearly fabricated. I've worked with Ms. Williams for 2 days and seen nothing but professionalism and integrity. With respect, Mr. Liu, Patricia said, 2 days isn't enough time to truly know someone, especially someone skilled in deception. The vote was called. 5 board members voted to suspend negotiations, 4 voted to continue, and 3 abstained. The merger was officially on hold. As the meeting disbanded, Keisha sat in stunned silence. The other board members filed out quickly, avoiding her gaze. Only Rebecca Thompson approached them. I'm sorry, she said quietly. This doesn't feel right to me, but Henry made a compelling case for caution. After Rebecca left, Keisha and Jonathan were alone in the boardroom. I can't believe this is happening, Keisha said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's a setup, Jonathan said firmly. Everything about that document screams fraud. The timing, the convenient unavailability of records, the way Henry and Patricia had all the answers ready. But how can we prove it? We'll find a way. My research team is already investigating Henderson Import-Export. If it's a fake company, we'll expose that. Keisha stood up, her legs feeling unsteady. Maybe I should just quit. Go back to cleaning offices where I can't hurt anyone. Absolutely not, Jonathan said, gripping her shoulders gently. That's exactly what they want. They're trying to drive you away because they're terrified of what you might discover. But what if more lies come out? What if they destroy my reputation completely? Jonathan's eyes blazed with determination. Then we fight back. But we don't run. As they left the building, Keisha noticed Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens talking intensely in the parking garage. When they saw her looking, they stopped mid-conversation and stared back with cold hostility. They really hate me, Keisha murmured. They fear you, Jonathan corrected. And fear makes people dangerous. That evening, Jonathan insisted on having dinner delivered to his office so they could work on their response strategy. As they ate Chinese takeout and reviewed documents, Keisha found herself studying his face in the soft lamplight. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. Doing what? Fighting for me. Risking your business deal. You could walk away from all this drama. Jonathan set down his chopsticks and looked at her seriously. Because it's the right thing to do. And because... He paused, seeming to wrestle with his words. Because what? Because I believe in you. In these past few days, I've seen your intelligence, your courage, your integrity. Those qualities are rare in any business environment, but especially rare among people who have faced real hardship. His words stirred that warm feeling in her chest again. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you stepped forward to help strangers when you could have stayed safe in anonymity. I know you've survived loss and disappointment without becoming bitter. I know you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. Keisha felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of frustration. Thank you for believing in me when I'm having trouble believing in myself. Your confidence will return, Jonathan said softly. And when it does, Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens will regret the day they decided to make you their enemy. As the evening wore on, they worked side by side, researching corporate fraud cases and planning their counterattack. Despite the stress of the situation, Keisha found herself feeling more hopeful than she had all day. She was no longer facing this battle alone. Jonathan's faith in her was like armor against the lies and accusations. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But neither of them realized that Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens were already planning their next move, one that would test both their resolve and their growing trust in each other. The next morning brought unexpected news. Caroline Wu called Jonathan's office before 8 a.m. with an urgent update on their investigation. We found something, she said, her voice crackling through the speakerphone. Henderson Import-Export doesn't exist. Never has. The business license, the incorporation papers, even the office address, all fabricated. Keisha felt a surge of vindication mixed with anger. So we can prove the document was fake? It gets better, Caroline continued. We traced the private investigation firm that supposedly provided the background check to Henry Walsh. Guess who owns it? Jonathan leaned forward. Don't tell me. Patricia Stevens' brother-in-law. The whole operation is a shell company set up specifically to manufacture false information. Can we prove this legally? Jonathan asked. We're working on it. Our lawyers think we have enough for a defamation case and possibly fraud charges. After ending the call, Keisha felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. We can clear my name. We can do more than that, Jonathan said grimly. We can expose their entire operation. But their celebration was short-lived. Linda Chin knocked on the door with a worried expression. Mr. Liu, you need to see the morning news, she said, turning on the television. A local business reporter was speaking. Shocking allegations about Liu Industries' hiring practices have surfaced. Sources claim the company is using unqualified personnel for sensitive business negotiations, raising questions about corporate responsibility and due diligence. The report went on to describe Keisha as a former janitor with questionable credentials, who had somehow gained access to confidential merger discussions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Keisha sank into a chair, watching her professional reputation being destroyed on live television. They're not just attacking me anymore, she said quietly. They're going after your company too. Jonathan's jaw tightened as he reached for his phone. Linda, get me our public relations team immediately. And call our lawyers. I want to know our options for stopping this defamation campaign. Over the next few hours, the story spread across business media. Jonathan's phone rang constantly with calls from investors, partners, and journalists seeking comment. Some of Liu Industries' American clients began expressing concerns about the company's judgment. This is exactly what they wanted, Keisha said as they watched another news segment. They're making it too expensive for you to keep me. They underestimated my stubbornness, Jonathan replied, but she could see the stressed lines around his eyes. Around noon, Rebecca Thompson called with more bad news. Jonathan, I'm sorry, but the Morrison board voted to formally terminate merger discussions. The negative publicity has made everyone nervous. Rebecca, you know those allegations are false. I believe you, but the other board members are scared. Henry convinced them that moving forward would damage both companies' reputations. After the call ended, Keisha stood up abruptly. That's it. I'm resigning. I won't let them destroy your business because of me. Sit down, Jonathan said firmly. But your company is suffering because Sit down. The authority in his voice made her comply, but her eyes flashed with frustration. Keisha, look at me, Jonathan said, his voice gentler now. Do you trust me? Of course, but Then trust me when I say that giving up now would be the worst thing we could do. For both of us. He moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. When I was building this company, I faced discrimination constantly. American businesses didn't want to work with a young Chinese entrepreneur. They questioned my credentials, my motives, my right to compete in their markets. He turned back to her. I could have given up. Moved back to China. Built a smaller, safer business. But I didn't because I knew that running away would only validate their prejudices. Keisha saw the parallel he was drawing. You think this is about more than just the Morrison deal? I know it is. Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens aren't just protecting their theft. They're protecting a system that keeps people like you invisible and powerless. His analysis struck her like a lightning bolt. In all her anger and hurt, she had focused on the personal attack without seeing the bigger picture. You're right, she said slowly. If I disappear now, it sends a message to every other person who might dare to step out of their assigned role. Exactly. Your mother worked 2 jobs so you could get an education. Are you going to let some corporate criminals decide that education was worthless? Keisha felt her fighting spirit returning. What do? We go on the offensive. But first, I want to show you something. Jonathan led her to his computer and pulled up a presentation he had been working on. I've been developing a new business model for Lu Industries' American operations, he explained. Instead of traditional corporate hierarchies, I want to create opportunities for people with diverse backgrounds and unconventional paths to success. The presentation outlined mentorship programs, educational partnerships, and hiring practices that looked beyond traditional credentials to find talent in unexpected places. This could help thousands of people, Keisha said, studying the slides. It could. But I need someone who understands both the business world and the barriers that keep talented people out of it. He looked at her meaningfully. I need a partner who's experienced both sides of the equation. A partner? I'm not just offering you a job anymore, Keisha. I'm offering you a chance to build something meaningful. To create the kind of opportunities you wish had existed when you needed them. The scope of what he was proposing took her breath away. This wasn't just about translation or cultural liaison work. He was talking about transforming how business was done. But first, Jonathan continued, we have to win this fight. We have to prove that people like Henry Walsh can't destroy honest people with lies and intimidation. Keisha felt a new sense of purpose filling her chest. This was bigger than her personal vindication or even the Morrison merger. This was about creating a different kind of future. How do we fight back? She asked. Jonathan smiled, a warrior's smile. We give them more truth than they can handle. He pulled out his phone and called Caroline Wu. Caroline, I want you to expand the investigation. Dig into every aspect of Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens' business dealings. Look for patterns of fraud, embezzlement, anything that shows this isn't their first time manipulating situations for personal gain. While Jonathan coordinated their legal response, Keisha found herself thinking about all the talented people she had met over the years who had been overlooked because they didn't fit conventional molds. Her mother's co-workers who spoke 3 languages but were stuck in minimum-wage jobs. College classmates who had brilliant ideas but lacked connections. Fellow janitors who had advanced degrees but couldn't break into their chosen fields. Jonathan, she said suddenly, what if we don't just defend ourselves? What if we use this attention to tell a bigger story? He looked up from his phone call. What do you mean? The media is paying attention now. What if we use that platform to highlight the real issue? How much talent gets wasted when companies only look at traditional credentials? Jonathan's eyes lit up with understanding. Turn the narrative from scandal to opportunity. Exactly. Show them that the real story isn't about one janitor getting promoted. It's about how many brilliant people are invisible because the system doesn't know how to see them. As they worked together to craft their counter-narrative, Keisha felt the partnership Jonathan had described beginning to take shape. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They were allies in a mission that mattered. But neither of them knew that Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens were watching from across the street, planning one final desperate move to silence them permanently. The next morning, Keisha arrived at the office to find Jonathan in an animated discussion with his security chief, Marcus Rodriguez. Both men looked grim. What's wrong? She asked, setting down her coffee. Someone tried to hack into our computer systems last night, Jonathan explained. They were specifically targeting files related to the Morrison merger and your employment records. Marcus nodded gravely. Whoever did this was professional. They knew exactly what they were looking for and how to cover their tracks. If our IT team hadn't been running enhanced security protocols, they might have succeeded. Keisha felt a chill run down her spine. They're trying to plant more false evidence, aren't they? That's our assumption, Jonathan said. Caroline's investigation is getting close to exposing their fraud. They're getting desperate. How desperate? Keisha asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Marcus and Jonathan exchanged a look. Desperate enough that I'm doubling your security detail, Marcus said. And I'm recommending that both of you vary your routines and avoid predictable patterns. The morning proceeded tensely. Every phone call, every unexpected visitor made Keisha jump. She tried to focus on work, but concentration was nearly impossible with the weight of constant vigilance. Around 11 a.m., Linda Chen knocked on Jonathan's door with excitement in her voice. Mr. Liu, Channel 7 News wants to interview you about the hiring diversity initiative you announced yesterday. They're calling it an inspiring response to the controversy. Jonathan's media strategy was working. Instead of remaining defensive, he had gone public with his vision for inclusive hiring practices, framing the attack on Keisha as an example of why such changes were necessary. Schedule it for this afternoon, Jonathan said. But make sure it's here in our offices, not at their studio. Security precaution? Keisha asked after Linda left. Partly. But also, I want them to see our workplace. I want them to interview our employees about the value of diverse perspectives. As they prepared for the interview, Caroline Wu called with a breakthrough. We found the smoking gun, she announced triumphantly. Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens have been running the scam for years. We found evidence of at least 4 other companies where they manufactured scandals to manipulate business deals. Can you prove it? Jonathan asked. Bank records, forged documents, payments to shell companies, we have everything. I'm meeting with federal investigators this afternoon. For the first time in days, Keisha felt genuine hope. It's almost over? Almost, Caroline confirmed. But be careful. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. The Channel 7 News crew arrived at 2 p.m. The reporter, Jessica Martinez, was professional and clearly well prepared. She interviewed Jonathan first, asking thoughtful questions about his hiring philosophy and the challenges facing minority candidates in corporate America. Some critics say you're taking unnecessary risks by hiring people without traditional credentials, Jessica said. How do you respond to that? I respond by asking what we lose when we only hire people who look and sound the same, Jonathan replied. Innovation comes from diverse perspectives. Ms. Williams saw solutions that others missed precisely because her background was different. When it was Keisha's turn, she found herself speaking passionately about the hidden talent in overlooked communities. There are brilliant people cleaning offices, driving taxis, working in warehouses, she said. They have skills and insights that could transform businesses, but they never get the chance to show what they can do. The interview was going well when Marcus Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, but we need to evacuate the building immediately. Jonathan stood up. What's happened? Bomb threat. Called in 10 minutes ago. The building management is clearing all floors. The news crew began packing their equipment quickly while building security guided everyone toward the emergency exits. Keisha found herself pressed close to Jonathan in the crowded stairwell. This isn't a coincidence, she murmured. No, it's not, he agreed grimly. 20 minutes later, they stood across the street with hundreds of other evacuees, watching police and bomb squad vehicles surround the building. The bomb squad's dogs were methodically searching floor by floor. Jessica Martinez approached them with her cameraman still rolling. Mr. Liu, do you think this bomb threat is related to the controversy surrounding your company? Jonathan hesitated, then decided on honesty. I think someone is very afraid of the truth coming out. After 3 hours, the all-clear was given. No explosive devices were found, but the disruption had achieved its purpose. The interview footage was corrupted during the evacuation, and the story would now focus on the bomb threat rather than their diversity initiative. Back in the office, Marcus delivered more disturbing news. The bomb threat was called in from a disposable phone purchased with cash. Whoever did this planned it carefully. Professional intimidation, Jonathan said. They're escalating. Keisha slumped in her chair, feeling overwhelmed. Maybe I should disappear for a while. Go visit my aunt in Atlanta until this blows over. Running away won't make them stop, Jonathan said. And it will let them win. But people could get hurt because of me. Jonathan knelt beside her chair, his voice gentle but firm. People are already getting hurt. Morrison Corporation's employees will lose their jobs if that company collapses. Other talented people will remain invisible if we don't prove that the system can change. His phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and his expression darkened. What now? Keisha asked. Caroline's meeting with the federal investigators was canceled. Someone claimed she was in a car accident. Is she okay? She's fine. The accident was staged, a minor fender bender that conveniently delayed her for hours. But the investigators had to reschedule. Keisha felt anger building in her chest. They're not just attacking us anymore. They're sabotaging the entire investigation. Which means we're close to exposing them. Marcus reappeared in the doorway. I have an update on the building's security footage from last night's hack attempt. He set up his laptop and showed them grainy surveillance video from the parking garage. We can't see faces clearly, but watch the timing, he said, pointing to timestamps. 2 people entered the building at 11:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes after the night security guard began his rounds of the upper floors. They knew the security schedule, Jonathan observed. Gets better. They left at 2:23 a.m., right before the guard's next scheduled check of the lower floors. Keisha studied the figures on the screen. One was tall and thin, the other shorter and stockier. Could those be Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens? Body types are consistent, Marcus confirmed. But we need more proof. As evening approached, Jonathan made a decision that surprised everyone. We're going to Morrison Corporation tomorrow morning, he announced. We're going to confront them directly. Is that wise? Marcus asked. Walking into their territory when they're this desperate? It's necessary, Jonathan said. They think they're in control because they're operating from the shadows. Time to drag them into the light. Keisha felt a mixture of fear and determination. What exactly are we going to do? Jonathan's smile was sharp as a blade. We're going to give them a chance to confess. And when they refuse, we're going to present the evidence that will destroy them. As they prepared to leave the office, Keisha looked out at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens were planning their next move. But for the first time since this ordeal began, she felt ready for whatever came next. The scared young woman who had stepped forward to translate 3 days ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that running from bullies only encouraged them. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. The morning of their confrontation with Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens arrived gray and drizzling. Keisha stood at her apartment window, watching rain streak down the glass while she prepared mentally for what lay ahead. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. Ready for this? She typed back, as ready as I'll ever be. But as she got dressed, choosing a professional navy suit that made her feel armored and confident, Keisha realized that her feelings about Jonathan had become complicated. Over the past week, he had been her protector, her ally, her champion. But somewhere along the way, those professional feelings had deepened into something more personal. She admired his integrity, his willingness to fight for what was right even when it cost him business. She was drawn to his quiet strength and the way he made her feel valued and respected. Most of all, she appreciated how he saw her potential when she had trouble seeing it herself. But those feelings scared her. Jonathan was brilliant, wealthy, powerful, everything she wasn't. The gulf between their backgrounds seemed insurmountable, and she had learned not to hope for things that seemed impossible. At Liu Industries, she found Jonathan in his office reviewing strategy with Caroline Wu and the legal team. He looked up when she entered, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip, a warmth that went beyond professional courtesy. Good morning, he said, his voice softer than usual. Did you sleep? A little, she replied, though the truth was she had lain awake thinking about him and what the future might hold. Caroline spread documents across the conference table. We have everything we need, she announced. Bank records showing the stolen money, evidence of the forged documents, even phone records proving coordination between Walsh and Stevens. The federal investigators would be standing by, ready to make arrests as soon as the confrontation provided the final pieces of evidence they needed. Remember, said Jonathan's lawyer, we need them to either confess or make statements that contradict their earlier claims. The recording devices will capture everything. As they prepared to leave, Marcus Rodriguez briefed them on security procedures. Plainclothes officers will be positioned throughout the Morrison building, he explained. If things go wrong, help will be seconds away. In the car riding to Morrison Corporation, Keisha found herself sitting closer to Jonathan than necessary. When their hands accidentally touched as they both reached for the same document, neither pulled away immediately. "Keisha," Jonathan said quietly, "I want you to know that whatever happens today, working with you has been the best decision I've made in years." "Thank you for giving me the chance," she replied, looking into his dark eyes. "I never expected." "Expected what?" "Expected to find someone who believed in me more than I believed in myself." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Jonathan seemed about to say something important when the car pulled up to Morrison Corporation. "Time to end this," he said, but his gaze lingered on her face. The Morrison Corporation lobby was buzzing with nervous energy. Word had spread that Jonathan Liu was coming for an emergency meeting, and employees whispered among themselves about what it might mean for their jobs. Rebecca Thompson met them at the elevator, looking haggard. "I don't know what Henry and Patricia are planning," she said quietly. "They've been locked in Walsh's office all morning, and they've asked me to record this meeting." "Perfect," Jonathan murmured. "We want everything documented." The boardroom felt like a battlefield as they entered. Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens sat on one side of the table with two men Keisha didn't recognize, lawyers, by their expensive suits and briefcases. "Mr. Liu," Henry said with false courtesy. "I'm surprised you wanted to meet after everything that's happened." "I'm here to give you both a chance to tell the truth," Jonathan replied calmly. Patricia laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "The truth? That's rich, coming from someone who hired a corporate spy." Keisha felt anger flare, but Jonathan's gentle touch on her arm kept her silent. "Let's talk about truth," Jonathan said, nodding to Caroline. Caroline began laying out documents with methodical precision. Bank statements showing transfers to fictional companies. Forged letterheads and signatures. Phone records and email trails. With each piece of evidence, Henry and Patricia's expressions grew more defensive, then desperate. "This is all circumstantial," Patricia's lawyer interjected. "You can't prove my clients did anything wrong." "Can't we?" Caroline smiled coldly. "We have security footage of both of them entering the Liu Industries building on the night of the attempted hack. We have bank records showing payments to the fake investigation company. We have examples of forged documents in their handwriting." Henry's face had gone pale. That's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Jonathan asked quietly. Henry Walsh cracked first. His hands shook as he reached for his water glass. "We were trying to protect the company," he said desperately. "Morrison has been struggling. We were afraid that if the merger fell through, thousands of people would lose their jobs. So you decided to steal from the company to help it?" Caroline's voice dripped with skepticism. Patricia Stevens shot Henry a furious look. "Don't say another word," she hissed. But Henry was spiraling. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. We just needed to buy time, find other solutions. The money we took was going to be paid back." "With what money?" Jonathan asked. "Your company is insolvent." Rebecca Thompson, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "Henry, what is he talking about? What money did you take?" The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Henry Walsh looked around the table like a trapped animal. We. He buried his face in his hands. "We took advances on consulting fees. Payments for services that hadn't been rendered yet. It was supposed to be temporary." "Temporary theft is still theft," Caroline said flatly. Patricia Stevens stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. We're not saying anything else without our lawyers present." "Your lawyers are present," Jonathan pointed out, gesturing to the two men in expensive suits. "Different lawyers?" Patricia snapped. But it was too late. The federal investigators had heard enough. Marcus Rodriguez's voice came through Jonathan's earpiece. "They're moving in now." The boardroom doors opened, and 3 FBI agents entered with badges displayed. "Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens, you are under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement and conspiracy," the lead agent announced. The next few minutes were chaos. Henry Walsh broke down completely, sobbing as handcuffs were placed on his wrists. Patricia Stevens maintained her defiant attitude even as she was read her rights. Rebecca Thompson stared in shock as her colleagues were led away. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I trusted them completely." "Which is what they counted on," Jonathan said gently. "Trust is a weapon in the wrong hands." As the commotion died down, Keisha found herself alone with Jonathan in the boardroom. The adrenaline of confrontation was fading, leaving her feeling drained but victorious. "It's over," she said, hardly believing it. "This part is over," Jonathan agreed. "Now we can focus on the future." He moved closer to her and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Keisha, there's something I need to tell you," he said softly. "What?" "Over the past week working with you, fighting alongside you, my feelings have changed." Her heart began racing. "Changed how?" "I started this as your employer. Then I became your ally. But somewhere along the way I realized I was becoming something else." "What?" she whispered, though she thought she knew. "Someone who cares about you as more than a colleague. Someone who admires not just your intelligence and courage but your heart. Someone who—" He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Someone who has fallen in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Keisha felt tears of joy threatening to spill over. "Jonathan," she said softly, "I was afraid to hope you might feel the same way I do." "The same way? I love you too. I think I have since that first morning when you defended me to Henry Walsh. When you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Jonathan reached out and gently touched her face. "Are you sure? We come from very different worlds." "We've built our own world," Keisha replied. "One where people are valued for who they are, not where they came from." When he kissed her, soft and tender in the empty boardroom, Keisha felt like she was claiming her future. Not just the career opportunity or the vindication of her reputation, but something deeper, the right to love and be loved regardless of background or circumstances. "What happens now?" she asked when they broke apart. "Now we build the company we talked about. We create opportunities for people like you who've been overlooked. We change how business is done. Together? Together. As partners in every sense of the word." Outside the windows, the rain was stopping and sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Rebecca Thompson knocked on the door, interrupting their moment. "Jonathan, the Morrison board wants to discuss resuming merger negotiations," she said. "With Henry and Patricia gone, we need this deal more than ever." "We'll be right there," Jonathan said, but his eyes remained on Keisha. As they prepared to enter the next phase of their partnership, both professional and personal, Keisha thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 week. She had gone from invisible to essential, from hiding her talents to celebrating them, from loneliness to love. But the most important change was internal. She had rediscovered the confident, ambitious woman she had been before loss and disappointment had made her doubt herself. Jonathan's love had been a catalyst, but the strength had been there all along, waiting to be awakened. "Ready to change the world?" Jonathan asked, offering her his hand. "With you?" "Absolutely." Hand in hand, they walked toward their future, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle and build something beautiful. 3 months later, Keisha Williams-Lew stood in the executive conference room of Lew Industries, now officially renamed Lew Williams International, watching the morning news with satisfaction. The anchor was reporting on the sentencing of Henry Walsh and Patricia Stevens, who had received 5 years in federal prison for their crimes. "The case has been hailed as a victory for corporate transparency and diversity in hiring," the reporter noted. "The Lew Williams Company has become a model for inclusive business practices, with their innovative mentorship programs being adopted by corporations nationwide." Jonathan entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee and a newspaper. "Page 1 of the business section," he said proudly, showing her the headline, "From Janitor to Executive, a love story that changed corporate America." Keisha laughed, accepting her coffee with a kiss. "I still can't believe they're calling it a love story. What would you call it?" "A miracle," she said without hesitation. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. The Morrison Corporation merger had proceeded smoothly once the fraud was exposed, saving over 2,000 jobs. The Lew Williams mentorship program had launched with enormous success, identifying talented individuals in unconventional places and providing them with education and career opportunities. But most importantly, Keisha and Jonathan had built a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and deep love. "The reporter wants to interview us again next week," Jonathan said. "About the expansion of our programs to other cities." 5 more cities confirmed?" Keisha asked, reviewing the documents on her tablet. 7 actually. Chicago and Denver signed on yesterday. Rebecca Thompson, now serving as Morrison's CEO after the board restructuring, knocked on their door. "Sorry to interrupt," she said with a smile, "but I have wonderful news. The first class of our joint training program graduates next month, and we already have companies competing to hire them." The training program was Keisha's brainchild, a partnership between Lew Williams International and Morrison Corporation that identified talented individuals working in entry-level positions and provided them with business education and mentorship. "How many graduates?" Jonathan asked. 47, Rebecca replied. Including a hotel housekeeper who speaks 6 languages, a security guard with an engineering degree, and a restaurant cook who developed revolutionary inventory management software. Keisha felt tears of joy in her eyes. 47 people getting the chances they deserve. Thanks to you, Rebecca said. None of this would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to step forward that day. After Rebecca left, Keisha and Jonathan stood at the window looking out at the city where their love story had begun. Do you ever regret it? Jonathan asked. Giving up your quiet life for all this chaos and responsibility? Keisha considered the question seriously. Her life now was demanding in ways she had never imagined. Board meetings, media interviews, program development, strategic planning. It was a far cry from the peaceful anonymity of her janitor days. But it was also meaningful in ways that took her breath away. Last week, she had received a letter from Maria Santos, a former waitress who was now studying international business through their program. Maria wrote about her dreams of opening an import business connecting American customers with artisans from her native El Salvador. Never, Keisha said firmly. This is what my mother meant when she said our talents are gifts meant to be shared. Speaking of gifts, Jonathan said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Keisha's eyes widened. Jonathan. I know we haven't talked about marriage yet, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. But I can't imagine building this future with anyone else. Will you marry me? The proposal was so unexpected that Keisha couldn't speak for a moment. Then she threw her arms around his neck. Yes, she whispered against his ear. Yes, yes, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Keisha thought about the journey that had brought them here. A week ago, no, it felt like a lifetime ago, she had been emptying trash cans and trying to become invisible. Now she was building programs that would change thousands of lives, running a company that prioritized people over profits, and marrying the man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. I have a confession, Jonathan said as they admired the ring together. What? That first day when you stepped into the boardroom? I wasn't just impressed by your language skills. No. I was struck by your courage. The way you held yourself, the confidence in your voice despite being in an intimidating situation. I knew immediately that you were someone special. Even in my janitor's uniform? Especially in your janitor's uniform. It told me you weren't afraid of honest work, that you had strength most people never develop. Their romantic moment was interrupted by Linda Chen's voice over the intercom. Mr. Liu, Ms. Williams, the camera crew from 60 Minutes is here for your interview. They were being featured in a major segment about innovative business practices and workplace diversity. The interview was scheduled to air the same week as their engagement announcement. Ready to tell our story one more time? Jonathan asked. Our story, Keisha repeated, loving the sound of it. Ready. As they walked toward the conference room where the cameras waited, Keisha reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was action in spite of fear. She had discovered that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances. Most importantly, she had realized that her mother had been right. When you have the power to help, staying silent makes you part of the problem. The 60 Minutes interviewer, a distinguished older woman named Margaret Chin, greeted them warmly. I have to say, yours is one of the most inspiring stories I've covered in 30 years of journalism, she said. From corporate espionage allegations to a love story that's changing American business, it has everything. As the cameras rolled, Keisha found herself speaking with the same confidence she had felt that first day when she stepped forward to translate. The real story isn't about me, she said. It's about all the talented people who are invisible because we only look for ability in expected places. Every day, brilliant individuals are overlooked because they don't have the right credentials or backgrounds. What would you say to someone watching this who feels invisible in their own workplace? Margaret asked. Keisha looked directly into the camera, thinking about the viewers who might be struggling with their own dreams deferred. I would say that your current situation doesn't define your potential. Skills can be learned, opportunities can be created, but courage has to come from within. Don't wait for permission to show what you can do. Jonathan reached over and took her hand. And I would add, he said, that diversity isn't just morally right, it's good business. The companies that embrace different perspectives and backgrounds will be the ones that thrive in the future. After the interview wrapped, they stood together in their office as the sun set over the city. In a few hours, they would attend a celebration dinner for their newly engaged status. Tomorrow they would continue building their programs and changing lives. But in this quiet moment, they simply held each other and marveled at the journey that had brought them together. Do you think we'll be able to help as many people as we hope? Keisha asked. I think we'll help more, Jonathan replied confidently. Because we're not doing this alone. Every person we help will go on to help others. Every life we change will change other lives in turn. Keisha smiled, imagining the ripple effects of their work spreading across the country and beyond. Somewhere out there, a talented individual was waiting for their chance, just as she had been waiting. Thanks to their love story, a love that had grown from mutual respect and shared values, fewer people would have to wait as long as she had. As the city lights began twinkling in the darkness below, Keisha Williams-Lew knew that she had found not just love, but purpose. And with Jonathan by her side, she was ready to change the world, one person at a time. The janitor who had once been invisible had become a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued. And that, she thought with deep satisfaction, was the most beautiful love story of all.